Hi, Rigsters here, back with another F-16 video. This time around, we're going to do a cold start in the F-16. This is a continuation from the key binding video, so let's get started. So, first thing to do to turn on the F-16 behind the throttle is the electric panel. You see it says off, bat, main power. Right click that up to main power. Then in front of the throttle, you left click on this knob right here. Under jet fuel, left click that to start too. As you see on the right hand panel just above your right knee, it will start engaging the engine RPM gauge. And while that's building up, we can close the canopy by either doing this with the guy right here, or you can use left control C on your keyboard to control the canopy closed. Then let it go, and then you want to lock it in place with this yellow handle here. Just do it like that. And then as we got the engine RPM to stable just a smidge past 20, we do the engine's idle keybind. You could also click on it in the cockpit, but I use the engine throttle's keybind. Like that. And while it's pulling up, arm the ejection seat, which is just on front of your left knee in the cockpit. Just in front of your right knee is the master caution and warning panel. So we're going to take a look at behind your back here towards the far bottom corner here, and you see all these switches and knobs under Avionics Power. Flip all these switches on except for map. Map doesn't really do anything in this game as far as I'm aware. And then we're going to align the INS. So what does the INS mean? It's internal navigation system. It's basically how the plane knows where it is. Quick tip before telling you how to do that is you want to do this either before you load weapons or well after. If you do it during weapon load, the plane rocks and it works the INS, so you don't want to do that because you'll have to restart that part of the step again. So you just simply right click this align knob once the stored heading as store HDG, and I'll move this up to the front here. You'll see on this right hand screen right here, this is called the DED Data Entry Display. And you might be going, oh god, Riggs, where's the HUD? I don't see it. How do I turn it on? Well, I'm just getting to that. So it takes about 90 seconds for the INS to align. Wait till it says ready, but you can turn on and do other stuff. On the front here, in the front of your front panel of the nose, is the SYM knob. You can either use the mouse wheel or left click and drag to turn it on. And look, your HUD is turned on. So real brief tour of the HUD here while the INS is aligning is you see on the left side here is the speed gauge. On the right is your altitude. At the top here is your heading ticker tape, and just below that is the pitch and descent gauge, which is between like 5 degrees right here for down, and then 10, and it goes on and so forth up to 90. So while it's doing that, while the INS is almost ready, we'll go back to the upper, just near your throttle again. And if you did some bindings in the previous video for missile INC, but if you use a knob or a button, you can see that I'm twisting the knob right around here. And you can also do the same thing for threat. Another quick thing I would recommend, but you don't have to bind this, is for the love of God, Tacan. Because by default, for some stupid reason, somebody thought it was funny to have the knob turned on by default. I think most players in the game, including myself, could care less about it being on when it's not really needed. So just turn it off so you don't go crazy. Trust me, you don't want that on the whole time. So, outside of that crazy ordeal, directly in front of the missile and threat knob is your radio panel right here. To turn it on, just right click it once to either main or both. There is functional differences between main or both. The default usually is ironically both. There is times you want to be in main. Depends on the server situation. It's a radio thing. So, in front of that is your ECM panel, your electronic countermeasures for short. To turn on your radar warning receiver, otherwise known as RWR. Far left border here, click on power. That turns it on there. Then just directly to the right of that is RWR on. Flip that on. O1 and O2 are useless in this game. They're not modeled yet, and I don't know what they actually do, to be honest. But I do know what CH and FL do. This is your chaff, CH, flares, FL, and right below that is the mode knob. There's various different modes. My personal favorite is the BYP button. So you just right click this knob all the way to BYP. That allows you, when you press the button bind for chaff flares, not the four-way switch but the other switch, it will drop one chaff and one flare per button press. Directly below that, to turn on your helmet without aligning properly, it just will be useful for the air but not air to ground. Just twist this knob, either with left click drag or use the mouse wheel. So that's how you do that there. And now we should check to make sure the INS is aligned, because by the time you do that, it should be blinking ready. Okay, so on the HUD, you'll see it's blinking the line here, and then on the top right corner, it'll be blinking ready there, so we can go down, back behind our right side of the back, down to here. And you want to do this carefully. Where you now have it in stored heading, you right click it twice to nav. Don't put it on norm, because norm is a slow alignment that requires data entry. Most people, including me, rely on stored heading because we don't want to wait 8 minutes for an alignment. That's approximately how long it can take through that setting for doing all the steps from start to finish for that part of the play. The next thing you want to do while you're back here is turn on the MIDS LVT. This is part of your IFF, which I'll briefly explain in a bit. This is part of the IFF thing that you do after INS is aligned. This helps it be more accurate as far as I understood it. There might be more to it than just that, but it is important to turn on. Okay, so we'll go to the IFF panel, which is towards your left, just behind your back towards the left panel here. You'll see it says IFF right here. So to turn on IFF, which is identification for any foe, very important system to have running, you just right click it from standby, low to norm. When it's in norm, you're good. So outside of IFF, one quick key binding thing just to show you why I bound the air refuel door instead of clicking on it, because it's much easier to open it than it is to close by using a button instead of a key binding. That's used for air refueling. By default, keep it closed until you need it, because it also dampens your controls and changes how the plane flies a bit. It tells the fly-by-wire to dampen certain movements. Okay, so we'll go back to the nose, and just below the panel we just looked at briefly is your backup altimeter. It tells you how high or low you are. Go from pneumatic, hold down to electric. So now it's in a more accurate mode. Pneumatic is the default backup and when you cold start. And then just below the DED panel, which is this little guy right here, you just left click and scroll in to get your backup climb and dive indicator lined up a bit like that. So that way it works there. Alright, so we're just almost done with the cold start. Two last little things here. Next to your landing gear panel, this is your landing gear handle, the stores config. Depending on what you put on your plane, the default is usually Cat 1, which is your air-to-air loadout. If you're carrying heavy bombs or heavy weights, you'll be in Cat 3. This tells the fly-by-wire computer how to do a soft limit of your angle of attack and various parameters. It is not necessarily a G limiter. It is just a restrictor of certain motions and dampening effect. It's very important you know when to switch that, and the plane will yell at you usually if you're in the wrong mode. But you don't want to always rely on it. It's a long story short. One quick tip on this panel, it's recommended but not mandatory, is when you right click the anti-skid switch that I just did to park and brake, what that does is it puts on your parking brakes. And you might be saying, well great, how do you release it? Well, this plane's unique in the fact that all you have to do is throttle up once you're ready to go, and it'll automatically disengage the parking brake. Very nifty feature. Wish more planes had that, to be honest. Okay, so we're almost ready to go. So, okay, just to show you how to turn on your sensors, it can hit backspace or click on the stick to remove it so you can see it better, which I'll do, obviously, is the left hard point and right hard point. That's what HDVT means. You flick those on. What those does is it turns on the harm in the targeted pod power systems. If you don't do that, they won't turn on. It's not necessary for this plane in particular, but it is something you want to do. Just to the right of that is your all-important radar, FCR, fire control radar, used for air-to-air, air-to-ground. It does have weight on wheels, so it won't be firing the radar while you're on the ground. It will do it when the wheels are up after takeoff. Just to the right of that is the radar altimeter, useful for bad weather, low visibility, night flying situations. Very useful tool. If you want to be milsim correct, you put it in standby. If you don't care, you can just run the radar altimeter, which people just do anyways because, you know, it's DCS. Okay. And another item of note, as a last little tip here before rolling out, is your DED data, which is on your, just the panel below that under section HUD. What this does is it repeats the DED data onto your HUD. This is very useful for various sub-modes, and I do use this quite a lot. You just right-click it once for partial information, and right-click it again if you want all the information from DED display in your HUD. I'll show you what that looks like. It looks like this. So, now, just see here, just do one class quick sweep. Verify the engine's stable. The INS is good. Everything's on. Verify there's no warning panel going off. We're clear to go. So, you want to also press the nose wheel steering button. When you press that once, this will show you the AR NWS. That means your nose wheel steering is turned on. So you just throttle up. It doesn't need much thrust to move on the ground even at heavier weights. Just taxi around just for a little bit. Now, and one nice little thing about this plane is if you have it on the default INS screen, which is on the right corner, just above the right screen, you'll see a GS on the bottom right corner here. You want to keep that speed below 15 when doing tight turns, because this plane tips over like crazy. So when you're turning, keep it below that if you have the screen up. If you don't have the screen up, you can still judge by engine RPM percentage, which is right here. You want to not go much higher than 80 while taxiing, especially when turning. And fuel flow. Usually it's going to be just under 4,000 pounds per hour. That's another way of telling how much thrust you're putting into the plane per hour. Well, how fast the fuel flows. And obviously, long story short, the higher you go, the more potential economy you get due to less drag. Not necessary by engine RPM, but just by air hitting the wings and stuff like that. And last thing I would say before wrapping this up here is if I go to adjust controls, there's one key binding I did forget in my first video, is the wheel brake on/off. Please make sure you remember to bind that, because you won't be able to stop or slow down for taxiing. And then of course hit OK after you bind it. Okay, so that wraps up the taxiing part of the F-16. Next up will be takeoff. Hope you enjoyed this video. I'm going to try to keep going at it with the F-16 series because there's a lot of interest in these videos. This is Rigsters Journey, signing off.